Welcome to Keep It Local, a podcast of Local Media Association. My name is Ryan Welton, your host, and today I am joined by Jim Haddadin and Susan Bell of Connecticut Public. What are we talking about today? Well, we're talking about AI, and specifically, we're talking about a Digital Innovation Award that Connecticut Public won this year for the 2025 Digital Innovation Awards. I just want to read this from the Connecticut Public press release. They were awarded first place for most innovative use of AI in a news organization. The recognition honors Connecticut Public's development of the Public Meeting Monitor, an AI powered tool designed to support news discovery and surface important local stories from communities across Connecticut. This is fascinating to me on many levels, but let's just start at the beginning. Tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tell the folks about Connecticut Public, the team, and what inspired the development of Public Meeting Monitor.
When Jim's gonna let me go first. So my name is Susan Bell. I am the Senior Director of our Data and Digital Service Bureau at Connecticut Public. I've been here for a little over 4 years. And I actually came to Connecticut from a development company. Anytime we start talking about digital innovation, my interest is immediately sparked. And one thing that we have been talking about as an organization is efficiencies, right? Efficiencies, expanded resources, um, so that we can grow our audiences, so that we can get more content out to them. What makes this situation, I think, really unique with the public meeting monitor is the idea actually came from Jim, who is the kind of hero and brainchild behind the use case behind this. So that's kind of where our paths overlapped, and I'm going to toss it to him and kind of let him discuss a little bit about that initiation and that initial thought process.
Yeah, and thank you very much, Ryan, for having us on to discuss this project. It is something that we've been really excited about. As you mentioned, I'm Jim Haddadin. I'm the investigative editor in our newsroom. Um, and, when we started looking at, the idea of AI and how we might approach it as an organization, we started out developing some guidelines about how we wanted to, engage with it and ways that we thought it would be responsible to be able to experiment with AI. So we use those guidelines to help us get into the question of, how would it work in a news gathering environment? And I've been a local news guy for a long time. I worked in newspapers for about 10 years, worked in broadcast television before coming to Connecticut Public. And so my mandate for a long time has been keeping tabs on what's happening in cities and towns that we cover as a local news broadcaster. So as one of the strengths that I see in artificial intelligence is being able to keep tabs on a huge amount of information, more information than we could look at as an individual newsroom. And so we looked at how can we start to use AI to help us become aware of what's happening in the different communities around the state. And that was the kind of genesis for how to start using it around public meeting monitoring.
So how does it work exactly? Because I will tell you, Oklahoma, the state where I'm in, lots of news deserts, lots of pockets where there's no coverage, and there are always public meetings. How does it work exactly?
Yeah, so we're privileged to have a very talented developer on our team, Rob Gabbery, who was helped with a lot of the kind of technical pieces of how the system operates. So huge credit to Rob for working through this with me. The way we have it set up is the system is keeping track of government meetings that are published on YouTube. We found YouTube as a starting point was a great entry point into this because it's a common platform. Once we solve the challenge of pulling material off of there one time, we can use that on a bunch of different communities that are putting their content on YouTube. And the other thing really that enabled this is in the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of communities started doing remote streaming their meetings, and YouTube is a common point for a lot of them to post this stuff. So when we have a list of communities that we're watching, when their YouTube channel has a new government meeting that gets posted, the system it looks for that on a regular basis, pulls down the video, grabs the audio off of there, transcribes the audio, and then we have a system of prompts that we've developed to try to kind of discern, is there anything newsworthy that happened during that meeting? and that is kind of a little bit more of an art than a science. And that's something that I think a lot of newsrooms are experimenting with that and now, and coming up with different approaches around how to kind of instill that sense of newsworthiness. But we have developed a prompt that kind of looks for up to 3 story pitches that might come out of that meeting. Once we have that information, currently it's going into a newsroom Slack channel. So this is completely for internal consumption for our reporters and editors to consider what the system has proposed. It produces a very brief summary. I think it's up to 200 words, along with like a headline for each kind of news nugget that comes out of that, and then gets posted live for folks to kind of take it up for consideration. One important thing I want to stress is this is not a system that is designed to be producing content for an external audience. One thing we wanted to be very mindful of is making sure that we're maintaining editorial control over the outputs of this product. So, I think one thing that we're really sensitive to is the idea that our audience at this point really is, trusts us as a broadcaster, trusts the news that they get from Connecticut Public, and what we want to produce for them is the work of the human editors and reporters. So we leave it up to the reporters and editors to take that information, verify it they would with any other kind of unverified tip you might get, and report out the story with the full kind of context and detail that you would need.
Yeah, this is a construct for the newsroom to be able to report on more stories and stories that they might not find otherwise. I've got a question for you, and it's a little bit about how the sausage is made. So feel free to, say that either you don't know or you don't want to divulge. But did somebody in the newsroom have to know all of the YouTube channels around Connecticut that might have public meetings, or was AI fruitful in bringing those up?
I was the poor guy who had to find all that stuff. uh, I think you certainly probably could have AI do kind of a survey of what the sources of information are in any given place that you want to keep tabs on. When we were starting out, we just kind of came up with a list of I think it's something like 23 different communities that have their stuff on some number of YouTube channels. So I kind of went through and found those. I will say, one thing we're looking at is bringing the system beyond just YouTube as a platform to start looking at other video hosting sites or other sources of information that the kind of local governments that we report on produce, whether it's audio, text, that type of thing. So we can kind of run the same process. And I think, if you were just starting out now, particularly with, we did this back in like April of 2025 was when we kind of had the first pilot up and running. And so the capabilities have really gotten so much better for some of these models. So I think you would have all kinds of opportunity to just say like, hey, I'm working on this project. Can you please go ahead and survey all the 169 cities and towns in Connecticut and tell me what you find?
And I think too, just to I think that one benefit too of using AI as kind of a back engine for this, even though it has human prompts and a lot of stuff has been set up manually, but the system itself is continually getting smarter. So we can go in and monitor if the news tips that it's coming up with are useful. Also, there is AI built into the tool itself, so there is a lot of information that's coming through. So you can go in and help AI can help organize that information, right? Even more so than just it spitting out those 3 tips. So I think that, it's going to evolve and continue getting better. And as Jim mentioned, the expanded platforms, the more sources that we can get in, just expands our newsroom's reach and coverage.
And how long have you used the tool in the newsroom now since it's gone live?
It's been a little more than a year that we've had it, pumping out this information into the internal Slack channel. We've been very deliberate about kind of bringing people into it, and part of that is so that we can also have a little bit of an onboarding process to stress a couple of the kind of safety protocols that we have around it. So every time we bring an editor or reporter in, I do a little spiel in the beginning to kind of let them know, what it is, how it works, to stress, the ways that we're thinking about using it in our news reporting and the importance of verifying all the information that's there, and also kind of doing their own original source reporting around it. We also kind of just, make sure people know that if they're even sharing information that comes out of it with others internally, they should, make sure that they give other people a heads up that this is coming from the AI meeting monitor system. we're trying to be very deliberate about making sure there isn't something that could jeopardize our, kind of credibility with information coming across that hasn't been verified.
Right. Has there been any, external communication to the audiences, or is this something that, I mean, for example, Trusting News has done a lot of work to suggest that newsrooms ought to, promote AI literacy to help the audience understand AI. Or have there been any external communications about the Public Meeting Monitor project that you've communicated externally?
Yeah, it's go ahead, Susan.
Well, I was just gonna say we had to really define, we had to define what, we needed to expose to the audience, because there's such a large human element, and the stories are not being written by AI. It literally is a news tip, device. The stories are followed up. It's reported on, written, by a journalist. So in that case, we don't have to expose that necessarily as AI. Versus our chatbot, which we may can talk about in a minute, which was
Yeah.
another efficiency. We do have to expose that, right? Because that is truly, even though it's closed sources, that's truly AI giving you the information. You're interacting directly with an AI bot, right? So I think it depends, and I think you have to be really careful with that.
That's a natural segue to move into the, chatbot conversation. Although, real quick, I just wanted to ask about Public Meeting Monitor. In the year that you've used it, has there been a story or two that really stands out that was a big success that you believe you would have only gotten because of the use of Public Meeting Monitor?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the two stories that drove the highest engagement on our website last year were both items that came out of using this system and seeing what came out of it, and they were both very, very kind of local parochial issues for the particular communities where they were occurring. One of them, I'll just give an example, was a town called Fairfield, which is in lower part of the state, kind of closer to the New York border, very kind of well-to-do area. There was a little bit of like a local furore because one of their executives in town had this kind of dual role as being in charge of finances, but also the emergency management director. And it came out that he had decided to purchase a vehicle for his official use that was quite expensive. The like sticker price was something like $140,000, and the way that we got onto this story was there was a meeting of like a finance board where they were having this very kind of like circumspect conversation about something called pink vouchers. And so the meeting monitor kind of flagged this very kind of unusual conversation about pink vouchers. And at that point, there wasn't enough to really know what was going on, but there was enough for me to see it. And as somebody who's been covering meetings for a while in my lifetime, say like, oh, that seems like they're saying a bad thing happened. So we kind of discovered that story and brought it to light. And again, like that, really resonated with the audience. You'd think it's such a local thing, but again, second highest engagement story that we had last year. One other thing I'll say is we had a string of coverage last year around some financial improprieties around a prominent nonprofit in the Hartford area, and we started our coverage around that issue when the Public Meeting Monitor flagged a conversation at the Hartford City Council where a bunch of just average citizens got up and expressed their surprise that this nonprofit had laid off its staff, kind of surprisingly, without really letting the community know what was going on. And the meeting monitor was, good enough to pick up like, hey, it looks like there's something significant here. There were a variety of people who got up and talked about it, and that put us on to this story that we covered for the remainder of the year and received a regional Edward R. Murrow Award for that work most recently. So it's, I think maybe we would have found our way to it, but certainly it gave us an early heads up that it was an important issue for the community.
So clearly, most innovative in AI, you have the award from Local Media Association, and now you developed this other tool, a chatbot, to help your audience. Tell us about that. Was it developed by the same person? And what is it being used for exactly?
Well, so again, we really are looking at our organization and looking at areas where we can create efficiencies. So when we started looking at some areas where we could improve, our audience care team was, as probably every audience care team across the public medium system, is just over inundated with calls, and a lot of them are repeat questions. How do I activate passport? What are some, you know, just questions that we actually have FAQs for on our website. The information's there, people just aren't finding it. So that was really the idea behind the initial kind of, we call our chatbot Curio. And Curio 1.0, when we launched it, was specifically designed to help audience care with those redundant questions. So it's a very controlled environment where we load up all of the knowledge sources for that. So it's not searching, just anywhere it can find. We load particular URLs, whether they're from PBS, whether they're from our FAQ questions. We're able to rate those so the bot knows what to go to first, and second to answer questions. And it's reduced the amount of phone calls our audience care team is getting, right? So that's a really good use case there. Now, the important thing to know about the audience or the Curio chatbot is it will always lead you to a human. We're never going to leave you because it can't answer everything, and we are constantly monitoring when people are not getting the questions answered that they're asking, or if there's a level of frustration. We have sentiment monitoring that we do, and all of those reports are delivered for us to monitor those, so we're able to improve it all the time. But if it can't answer a question, it gives you a phone number, it gives you a real person, it gives you a way to connect with a human. So I think that's very important too. It's a supportive tool, but it's not supposed to take the place of any of our staff members.
Quickly, so public media, known for fundraising seasons. I'm a fan of PBS. In fact, I'm part of both KOSU and KGOU here in Oklahoma, so I know how that goes. Is this chat bot? Is there any part of this that can be used to help people be guided through that process?
It can help answer a lot of questions and direct you to a lot of resources. One thing that we're very careful with is people's privacy. We definitely don't want to exchange, information that needs to be secured over the chatbot interface. So it's more of this is how you can give, this is where you can give, things of that nature. But the actual donation process is not happening within that environment.
All right, so two terrific tools here, and I can hear the audience right now say to themselves, maybe under their breath, "That's great, but you had somebody who knew how to program AI." What was the learning curve like, would you say? And is this something that any newsroom could do? I mean, for example, how easy would it be for somebody to start their own public meeting monitor?
I mean, I think that's a great question. And Jim, I'll let you chime in here. We are doing a lot of education right now around the system, about how it was built, why it was built. Some people do have the resources to maybe construct something similar. We are using a lot of common, open sources that are available. You can definitely mix and match those to create your own. And so we are trying to offer that out. We're also trying to expand adoption internally, so that we can decide if this is something that we can offer out to the public media system, right? So the idea is we want to grow audiences and we want to put tools in the hands of public media stations that help us all do that. So we have a lot more work to do there. It's a future idea, but it is more to come on that at a future date.
Yeah, I will just add to that. Certainly, I think the barriers to entry have come down pretty significantly since we started on this endeavor. And one of the big leaps forward in AI technology, particularly since kind of December-ish of last year, is this new rise of agentic tools. And that's kind of a fancy word, but in my mind, it kind of just means you can get them to do things on their own. And so I would say if someone's interested in this, the path forward might be kind of working with AI to ask AI how it could develop this type of a tool for you. And I think all of the big kind of frontier models are working in that direction where, you can kind of offload a lot of the real technical work to say, here's my goal. There's this city council that meets every Tuesday. Can you please help me figure out I can come up with a way to get like a briefing the next morning on what they did? And a lot of these tools might be able to get you to the point of getting that on their own. what we're doing is building something a little more fully fledged that has a lot more bells and whistles and a little more technical sophistication. But I think there are versions of this that I think are definitely doable.
In other words, you got to start somewhere, and AI has proven itself to be a good wingman, and that if it can't develop it itself, for example, if I went into Chat GPT, it's not by itself going to be able to develop this, but it might be able to lead me to the agentic AI tools that would at least allow me to get started. I got another question that I just thought of, because audience growth is really at the heart of this. What sort of attribution do you have in play? I mean, you can look at page views, but do you have any other attribution models in play in terms of how this work may have led to more donors?
I will say, I mean, I as a journalist feel like I am doing my job better and I am serving our mission at Connecticut Public better by having more awareness of what's happening in these different communities. Like we haven't given up anything that we're doing. That's something I want to stress here is this is not a system that has kind of like replaced the journalists we had in the newsroom or something like that. This has really been augmenting our understanding of what's happening. Like, not only kind of in like what we're able to produce, but where we're able to get coverage. I've done stories in parts of the state where we haven't really had a news report in a little while. I'm embarrassed to say how long. And I remember meeting somebody who is, she wound up being one of our donors, but she lives in one of the communities that I was reporting on and had read that story. And it was meaningful to me that we were able to kind of do something about the place where she lives in a way that we weren't doing previously.
And clearly, it was meaningful to her because they feel seen.
Exactly, yeah, I think it was I think it was a pleasant surprise for her to say like, "Oh, wow, Connecticut Public did a Norwich story, great."
And a real interaction too, the with the Curio chatbot, I think anytime that we're providing an additional way, to get information and direct people easier, sometimes websites can be tough to navigate. And sometimes people don't want to pick up the phone and call. We're giving them kind of that pre-entry into discovery, and we're monitoring how much it's used. One really good thing is that we're not getting any feedback, negative feedback about the tool being on our side. So, I do think that the people are using it are finding answers. And so we have to think that that's playing a part into fundraising and members and all the growth that we're looking for there.
That's a great sign that you haven't gotten any negative feedback on the chat bot being on the site.
A little surprising. What we do find is people do get frustrated when they don't get the answers they're looking for, right? And so we've done a lot of expansion there, because even though we developed it as kind of a audience care tool for Passport in particular, people don't know that, right? Our audience doesn't know that. They just see a tool to interact with, and they start asking it all kinds of questions, right? So we've expanded it for programming, PBS programming, NPR programming. You can actually get episodes of our original podcast right in the chatbot, and it'll play for you. So we're trying to take those audience frustrations and turn them into a solution.
Yeah, customer service. I would have to think that that is as much about retention as it is about discovering potential new donors. So these two products, you guys are miles ahead of most when it comes to AI. Do you have any crazy visions for what might be next?
I think that, I think right now our head is there's always other efficiencies we're looking to explore. I think right now we are really interested in the adoption of the tools that we have created, and making them the best that they can be, which is more internal adoption, right? So right now, everybody sees the output of the work that's being done, and we really want to be people to be able to get their hands on the tool and not have to be a developer to use it. So, that's kind of future rollout and expansion, so we can continue that use case, so we can continue the conversation, so we can answer questions like, "What's your adoption like?" We've got to get more people using it, and Jim is great. He's creating a team of heroes in the newsroom, who will interact with these tools. So I think that we have a lot of work left to do here, that we're excited about, and we'll let you know when we come up with a new product.
Fantastic. Jim, anything I failed to ask or anything that you'd like to add?
No, I'll just add to that. I totally agree, Susan. I think we're working on kind of adoption with the tools that we're building. From the news side, I'm so excited about the potential of being able to use these tools for investigative projects. It gives you the capability to just do analysis on such a huge trove of information that would be difficult or impossible to kind of manually sort through. And so that type of capability, raises some exciting prospects.
If folks have questions, of course, there's the comment section here on YouTube or wherever you might be listening to the podcast. But if folks wanted to reach out, where's a good place for them to find you?
Well, you can, people can reach out directly through email. My email is sbell at Connecticut or ctpublic.org. And I am very open to anybody contacting us. I can direct you into the right place. Um, I think that would probably be the best point of contact. And I know Jim's always open to talking to other people about this product.
My name's hard to spell, but if you Google me, my phone number's out there. I'm surprised I don't get more spam calls. My phone number's out there. Call me up.
Fantastic. I love that. Okay. So leave a comment if you're watching this, wherever it might be. You could also message me at ryan.welton@localmedia.org. Maybe you would like to be a future guest on Keep It Local. Maybe you would like to sponsor this podcast. Reach out if you would. Would love to respond to you. But for this episode, for Jim Haddadin, Susan Bell from Connecticut Public, I'm Ryan Welton from Local Media Association. Thank you for listening to Keep It Local.